Okay, so last night, you are probably able to relate to this experience. First off, I'm Brandy Susie. I am a pharmaceutical research scientist, skincare formulator, and health coach. I became a health coach after my own personal journey with a full-blown case of something that I did not believe existed. So it, you may be able to relate to one of these symptoms: migraine, fatigue, weight gain, period problems. Like whatever this looks like, whether this looks like short cycles, whether this looks like painful periods, whether this looks like PMS, whether this looks like really heavy bleeding for a lot of days, whether this looks like, I've already mentioned short cycle, long cycle, whether this looks like infertility, whatever canvas that is, period problems. Um, and absolute worst of all, chronic UTI symptoms. I was experiencing all of those at once, and they all started within about 2 weeks of me stopping hormonal birth control. And so there's this thing known as the post-pill syndrome. And I didn't believe it. I was like, that's complete hogwash because I've stopped hormonal birth control multiple times over the 20 plus years that I took hormonal birth control. And never had I ever had an experience like the last time I stopped hormonal birth control. And seriously, within 2 weeks, I developed my first ever UTI. I was having migraines or headache of some sort pretty much daily. I was having that mid-afternoon where if it was after 3 in the afternoon, I was looking for bed. I was like, I don't think I can make it until a reasonable bedtime. Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna make it. And then often, although I've got to think about this because the thing is things got much worse from this initial set of symptoms. Things got much worse before they got better. So what happened was for the next few years I chased symptoms. I did the thing that you do when you were raised in Western medicine. So just just so you know, I come from a long line of nurses. My grandmother was a nurse, my mom's a nurse, my sister's a nurse. So I was talking in terms of CCs and stat and O2 sat levels and like tachycardia and the difference between tachycardia and bradycardia from a very young age. So I kind of loosely joke that med speak is my second language. Um, and then of course I went into, you know, crank the geek up to 11, folks. She's going into pharma. And that's what I did. Uh my formal training is as a chemical engineer. I worked for the CDC. I taught organic synthesis lab. After that, actually kind of fell ass backwards into a job doing formulation. This was a field that I did not know existed, like very few do. And anyways, like what happened with that kind of catapulted me into this making my own skincare and winding up in pharma. And then when I started getting sick, I did what any good girl raised in Western medicine does, which is give my power to a doctor to get me well again. And I did that for a really, really long time, like embarrassingly long time. So when I started experiencing this like full-blown case of post-pill syndrome, I went down the Western medicine route. With the UTIs, I was walking into walk-in clinics. I was going to see my general practitioner. I was getting referred to the urologist. At some point, my standard urine cultures came back negative, and I speak of the chronic UTIs. It's not that I was not worried about everything else. It's that when you have to pee very badly every second of every day and you go to bed at night seriously wondering if you're going to wet the bed during the night as like a 40-year-old, when you pee and it burns and you finish peeing and you get up off the toilet and you're like, I've got to pee again. I mean, I seriously, there were days when I thought I was going to have to call in sick. And I was really loathsome to take the azo, so that over-the-counter um, medication that is methenamine hydrochloride, I believe is the active. Anyway, methenamine is the part of it we're interested. It doesn't really matter what the whether it's HCl or what it is. But anyway, methenamine is what we're interested in. That gets converted into formaldehyde in the bladder. Formaldehyde is a known carcinogen, not just in the state of California. Like, it's been proven over and 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 over again that formaldehyde is a known cancer-causing agent. And so I was extremely hesitant to take the over-the-counter methenamine for relief. And so this meant I was walking around drinking liters of cranberry juice a day. And if you've been like in this situation, you know that cranberry juice makes you pee like a Russian racehorse. So imagine, um, I still remember distinctly, I'd gone to visit my friends back in Colorado, and we were invited over to their house for dinner. And they lived outside in Denver. I didn't think I was going to make it to their house without peeing all over myself, because I'm like, I drink entirely too much cranberry juice. Okay, entirely too much cranberry juice. And then I get to their house, and lo and behold, I'm like, I've got to pee every 20 minutes. And it's legit, I've got to pee. Like, that cranberry juice is running through me. Like, I'm so sorry, but it was so embarrassing. I mean, it was incredibly embarrassing. These are friends that I hadn't seen in 5 years. We went back, to visit friends and family. I hadn't seen them in 5 years, and like every 20 minutes, I'm like, I gotta go to the bathroom. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I I mean, yeah, they understand. They're friends, but still, it was so embarrassing. I mean, that happened years ago, and I'm still just anyways. So I was doing the cranberry juice, I was doing Manos, I was taking azo when I absolutely couldn't tolerate the symptoms, I was taking azo. Um, at some point, the standard urine cultures came back negative. And when that happened, I fell down the rabbit hole of chasing microinfections. These are also known as embedded infections. I'm trying to think if there's another word for them. Microinfections and embedded infections are the two that are most commonly used. This was a theory placed by this incredibly intelligent nurse practitioner, Ruth Chris. She's now retired. I found her, like, this was a morning when I thought I was going to have to call in sick to work, because I, like, literally could not step out of the bathroom without being like, the need, like, I know I do not have to pee, but it feels like I have to pee. And I could not get myself out of the bathroom that morning. And when I finally did, it was finally like, okay, I think I'm good now. I think I can make it to work. About a 20-minute car ride. I think I can make it. Um, that morning before I left, I'd pulled up a podcast interview with Ruth Chris. This was on Better Health Guys podcast, and listened to that on the way to work. And then from there, started chasing microinfections. That's what I did. Even though Ruth Chris is retired, she works with other practitioners to like guide them through the same process of ordering the microinfection test. And this is, you have to ship your urine out. It gets replicated by PCR, polymerase chain reaction. And then they look at the DNA profile and say, hey, like, this matches this particular strain of bacteria. And then that's how the practitioner determines which antibiotic to prescribe. And I mean, it's a lot easier than it sounds, because it's all laid out on a single sheet of paper of, okay, you've got this strain, it's resistant to these particular antibiotics, this is where you go. And so you just go down the list and figure out, okay, which antibiotic is needed for all of the strains that are showing up. So I went down this path for a while, and I was getting prescribed harsher and harsher antibiotics. And mm, at some okay, so I have worked with very toxic chemicals before in my first job in pharma. Extremely toxic chemicals. Like they're very volatile, so it's easy to vaporize. It's easy to get exposure by breathing these in. I'd go home with these. Like the only time in my life before I stopped hormonal birth control when I actually had headaches, I'd go home with these crazy headaches. It was because I'd gotten exposed to too much methylene chloride that had converted into carbon monoxide in my bloodstream, creating a headache. Methylene chloride, aka dichloromethane, is extremely hard on the liver. So I know what liver pain feels like. Okay. um, so one of these rounds of antibiotics, it recreated that same kind of liver pain. And I told the practitioner, and then she's like, yeah, go ahead and finish this round out. So I did, because I only had like maybe 2 days left. And then when symptoms flared back up again, and we sent off, got the results back, she prescribed me another round of that exact same antibiotic for a month. For a month. And I'd had liver pain after 7 days. Now, there were many reasons for me in that moment, like being shaken to my core. And one of those was I was pretty convinced I was going to get C. diff and die. And the other one was my liver cannot handle a month's supply of this. And that was kind of like in that moment, that's when I drew a line in the sand. That's when I said no more. That's when I threw up a boundary and said, I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to stop going down, like repeating this exact same cycle and getting nowhere. And I'm going to figure this out on my own. Watch me. And I did. So within a week of that, I really think the universe had been waiting, like holding its breath for me to say, holding its breath for me to make the realization that I already have the tools I need. I am a research scientist. I know how to do research. That is all that I needed. From the very beginning, when I started experiencing all those symptoms at once, I was convinced I was in energy crisis. My pee smelled like acetone. Once again, I know what acetone smells like because I worked around it a lot. Acetone is a ketone. I'd mentioned to every single healthcare provider, whether this was Western medicine, whether this was functional medicine, whether this was naturopath, whether this was Ayurvedic practitioner, whether this was traditional Chinese medicine practitioner. I'd mentioned to all of them, specialists, non-specialists, doesn't matter. Every single one of them heard me say, my pee smells like ketones. Do you think I might have a problem with insulin? And every single one of them reassured me that no, you don't have a problem with insulin, because look at these urinary markers. They would indicate if you had a problem with insulin. Look at these blood values. They would indicate if you had a problem with insulin. Within 1 week of me actually listening to inner guidance, which had been there all along, with me actually, determined to take the reins back of my own health, I was on my way to symptom free. And this was after a year and a half of suffering relentlessly from chronic UTIs, along with a whole bunch of other symptoms. And what was happening as those UTI symptoms were disappearing, so was the chronic fatigue, so was the migraine. My weight was starting to drop back down without me doing anything. And I started like at first I thought it was just insulin resistance, because there's basically what's going on. The TLDR version of this is estrogen and progesterone, whether they are what your body makes or the synthetic estrogen and progesterone, which are not, again, they're synthetic. They are not bioidentical. They're actually ethinyl estradiol and a progestin of generation 1 through 4 at this point. Those are not bioidentical. However, within the body, they act similarly to estrogen and progesterone that your body makes naturally. Those both, regardless of which class we're talking about, those both impact how your body uses insulin and how your body basically metabolic function within your body at large. Now, metabolic function, I know this might sound scary. It's a fancy way of saying how well your body converts the food you eat into energy. Okay. So when you struggle with insulin, you're in an energy crisis where you are unable to meet energy demands efficiently. You're unable to meet energy demands in the way that your body prefers to meet its energy demands. And I'm pretty convinced at this point that every single one of us has a preferred way that our own particular body prefers to meet its energy demands. And what I'm talking about here is you can meet energy demands with fats, proteins, or carbohydrates. Carbs are kind of the universal source for energy. There are certain cells within the body, like red blood cells, that cannot get energy from any other source. Okay, the red blood cells cannot get energy um, from fats. They cannot get it from proteins. Now, most other cells can get it from any of those three sources. However, carbs is still the preferred, like, regardless of who you are, carbs is still the preferred. Now, that said, one person might be like a 67% carbs, 33% split beyond fats and proteins, mostly, fats, not very rarely proteins. Like that's just kind of a filler. Whereas somebody else might be 75% carbs, 25% the other macros, the other two macros. So whenever, like whatever it looks like for your own particular body, that is how your body prefers to meet its energy needs. And when it is struggling to do that, you wind up in energy crisis, aka metabolic dysfunction. This always is because of an imbalance in thyroid, insulin, and cortisol. We are paying, these are all three hormones, okay? These are three hormones. We pay too much attention to the wrong hormones. For women, doctors fixate on estrogen and progesterone. Here's the truth. Estrogen imbalance in estrogen and progesterone is merely a symptom of something deeper rooted. It is a symptom of metabolic distress. It is a symptom of an energy crisis. Estrogen and progesterone do not go out of balance on their own. I'm going to repeat that. Estrogen and progesterone do not go out of balance on their own. They are never the first hormones to go out of balance. There is always thyroid, insulin, and cortisol, one of those three or all three of those that go out of balance first. All right. I realize this is getting a little lengthy, so I'm going to cut it here. What we're going to talk about in the next video, I'm actually going to talk about the things that we should have been taught in school and we weren't. This is basic body literacy. This is how to use your own body because your body is smart. Your body speaks in its own language. Your body tells you everything you need to know about your state of well-being and your state of health. You don't need lab work. You don't need doctors. Okay. You need to rely on your own body and your own body signals. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So I'm going to talk about how you're able to use your body temp to suss out a cortisol dysregulation. And we're going to talk about how to use body temp even to recognize like a thyroid problem. Okay. That sound good? One of the things that I am also doing here, so I previously recorded a lot of different videos around using. So basically, the other thing that your body does, let me just circle back on that. The other thing that your body does is it lets you know when ovulation is going to occur. Your body lets you know when your fertile window opens and when it closes during every single cycle. Okay. And it does this with a number of ways. So I recorded back when I thought I was going to teach fertility awareness, I recorded a whole bunch of videos on how to use fertility awareness either for contraception or to conceive, like to boost your chances of conception. And I'm going to start releasing those here, just like for free. The info is really intense. You can handle it. So yeah, that's all there is to it. Um, the other thing that I wanted to say, so even like there is a time and a place for lab work. Like, how do I want to say this? What, okay, how I want to say this is lab work can help direct you a little more quickly sometimes towards resolution of symptoms, but it can also mislead you. So, the key thing that you want to focus on is more symptom resolution and more, and with that, like more of your biomarkers, like paying more attention to your biomarkers. So I truly, truly, truly feel like this is how I go about it daily. I actually use because once again, as I mentioned, estrogen and progesterone never go out of balance without thyroid, insulin, cortisol, at least one of those going out of balance. So I have an autoimmune thyroid condition. This is the body has attacked my thyroid, and my thyroid gland has been destroyed to the point where it is not capable right now. This attack is like still going on because my thyroid antibodies are quite high still. So my body has attacked my thyroid gland to the point where my thyroid gland is not able, like there's not enough of it and it's not functioning well enough to generate thyroid hormone at a healthy level. And so I have to supplement with bioidentical thyroid hormone. Now, the way that I dose and the way that I've titrated myself up to the right dose of thyroid hormone. Now, I am working with a doctor on this. Okay. I'm working with an integrative practitioner. This doctor took me from the time of diagnosis to the time I found this doctor, 6 years to find. Um, so I am working with a doctor who, he relies on lab tests. I rely on my at-home urinary monitor for estrogen and progesterone daily to titrate myself up to the right, the healthy range of thyroid hormone that has been working beautifully. um, I actually had lab work ran last week based on Brandy titrating herself up, and I was right in the middle for my free T3 levels. So I was pretty stoked about that, like the middle of the reference range for those. Um, so there is a time and a place for labs. You just have to be careful and cognizant not to use labs exclusively, especially when you have problems. Um, that's where, I mean, ultimately, treating the symptoms and not treating the lab is where we want to go. Because just because it's not showing up on a lab test doesn't mean that there's not a problem. All right. I'm gonna cut it for here. Oh yeah, right. I was like, what did I say I was going to talk about next? All right, I'll record another video. So like I say, the next video that comes out will be around um like tracking your body temperature to assess out whether or not you've got a cortisol problem. All right, I'll catch you in that one. Bye.